Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. There are moments in the long, winding river of human history when the world seems to whisper secrets that time has tried to bury. Among the deserts and fertile valleys of ancient Egypt, beneath the drifting sands and the silent monuments that have outlasted kingdoms, lies one such secret, one so old, so deeply woven into the dawn of civilization, that even the stones appear to remember it. The story of how the world began, according to the ancient Egyptians, is not a single tale whispered by a single priest in a single temple. It is a constellation of creation, scattered across cities that rose and fell like the passing of seasons. And at the heart of these stories rests a forgotten truth, that the origins of heaven, earth, gods, and humanity were imagined not once, but many times, shaped by geography, politics, and the quiet pulse of the Nile. The ancient world rarely preserved its beginnings so carefully. Most cultures held a single cosmogony, one tale that defined creation. But Egypt, vast, diverse, and ancient beyond ancient, held multiple visions. In the ruins of Heliopolis, the Dawn City, priests once guarded a myth that spoke of a lonely creator emerging from boundless waters. In Memphis, craftsmen whispered of a divine architect whose thoughts shaped the universe as metal bends under a hammer. And in Hermopolis, scholars of the archaic age spoke of 8 primordial forces swirling in darkness before existence itself. Each tale is a door, and behind it stand the earliest attempts of humanity to understand light, life, and the quiet moment before creation. Yet the origins of those myths did not arise in isolation. The deserts that guarded Egypt on both sides acted as a shield, preserving not only its people but also its stories. The annual flooding of the Nile, an event so precise that priests could mark its rhythm almost to the day, created an ordered worldview in which cycles were divine. The rising and setting of the sun, the appearance of star constellations such as Sirius, the star whose heliacal rising signaled the coming flood, shaped their understanding of rebirth. And so their creation myths reflected nature's own patterns. The world, they believed, must have emerged from water, just as the Nile brought new land from silt each year. Light must have struggled out of darkness, just as dawn broke over the desert horizon. Order must have conquered chaos, for the river itself brought life from the wild floods. The story begins not with gods or mortals, but with stillness. Before time had breath, before temples rose or pharaohs claimed descent from heaven, there existed only the vast, infinite waters known as Nun, a dark and endless ocean without sky, without land, without direction. It was neither good nor evil, it simply was. The Egyptians did not imagine chaos as torment, but as shapelessness, a void waiting for form. In this limitless sea, no wave broke, no wind stirred, and no light shone. It was the pre-creation state, the silent womb of all potential. From these waters, according to the Heliopolitan priests, emerged Atum, the self-created one. He rose from the waters without parent, without companion, standing on the first mound of earth, a sacred concept reflected in the pyramidal shapes that would later dominate Egyptian architecture. This primordial mound, called the Benben, symbolized the very moment the world gained stability. Archaeologists have long noted that early temple designs included raised stone platforms that mimic this mythical elevation, suggesting that myth and architecture grew together like reeds along the riverbank. Atum, solitary yet complete, stood upon the Benben and brought forth the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut, embodiments of air and moisture. Through them, the world began to separate sky from earth, dryness from wetness, breath from water. And from their descendants would emerge Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, locked together in an eternal embrace until Shu pushed them apart to make space for life. The Egyptians saw this separation not as violence but as cosmic necessity. In the patterns of nature, day pulled away from night, The fertile fields broke from barren sand, the river carved a path between lands. The universe mirrored the Nile, and the Nile mirrored the universe. But the Heliopolitan myth was more than a story. It became the ideological foundation for kingship. The pharaoh, believed to be the living embodiment of divine order, stood as the guarantor of harmony, known as Mat. Archaeological inscriptions from temple walls show how priests tied creation itself to the pharaoh's duty to maintain balance. If Atum created the world by emerging from chaos, then the pharaoh must keep chaos at bay by ensuring justice, stability, and proper ritual. Thus, the myth shaped politics as deeply as it shaped belief. Yet across the plains and stone causeways of Lower Egypt, another city told a different beginning. In Memphis, the cult center of craftsmen and builders, priests taught that the world did not emerge from physical acts but from thought and speech. Their creator was Ptah, a god whose mind conceived all things and whose tongue brought them into existence. The famous Shabaka stone, an ancient artifact discovered in Memphis, records this Memphite theology with remarkable clarity. According to its inscription, Ptah first imagined the world mountains, rivers, stars, and then spoke their names into being, causing them to become real. This idea, deeply philosophical, foreshadows later reflections on creation through divine word found in various cultures. For Egypt, it revealed a profound truth, that creation could be intellectual, a product of order and reason rather than physical struggle. This Memphite doctrine reflected the city's identity. As the home of artisans, sculptors, and builders, Memphis revered craftsmanship. Stoneworkers who carved statues and architects who designed temples understood that creation comes from the mind before it emerges in stone. Their myth honored the very process by which Egypt's monuments were born, the idea, then the word, and finally the form. Far to the south in Hermopolis, a third vision of creation took shape, one older and more abstract than the others. Priests there believed that at the beginning of time existed 8 primordial forces, the Ogdoad. They were paired as male and female, each representing a fundamental element of the pre-creation world: darkness, hiddenness, endlessness, and chaos. These forces swirled together in the waters of none, forming an egg or a lotus blossom from which the first light emerged. Though variations existed, many traditions describe a radiant being rising from this lotus, illuminating the cosmos for the first time. The lotus itself, a flower that opens with sunrise and closes at dusk, symbolized the cycle of rebirth the Egyptians observed in nature. This version reveals a remarkable early attempt to conceptualize creation as the interplay of universal principles. Modern scholars note parallels between the Ogdoad and other ancient cosmological systems where dualities shaped existence: light and dark, male and female, finite and infinite. These 3 myths did not compete. They coexisted, representing local traditions shaped by geography, political power, and spiritual philosophy. Egypt was not a land of contradictions but of layers, each story adding depth to the ancient understanding of life's beginning. As centuries passed, these myths gained depth, absorbing the rhythms of the Nile and the knowledge preserved in temple libraries. Each city guarded its own sacred manuscripts written by priestly hands on papyrus scrolls, stored within chambers that only the initiated could enter. These scrolls, though lost to time, left their echoes on temple walls, funerary texts, and inscriptions carved with meticulous care. Through them, the Egyptians crafted not only creation stories, but a spiritual map that guided their understanding of life, death, and the eternal cycles governing both. The priests of Heliopolis continued to refine their teachings, developing what became known as the Ennead, a divine family of 9 gods that began with Atum. The Ennead offered a structured genealogy, a way to connect natural elements and celestial forces with divine personalities. This structure resonated with the Egyptians, who valued order above all. In their cosmic vision, everything had a place, just as every field had a season and every star followed a path. The movement of the sun across the sky, the rising of Sirius, and the yearly flood were all reflected in the mythic order established by the Ennead. Archaeologists studying remnants of Heliopolis have uncovered foundations of what was once one of the greatest temple complexes in Egypt. Though little now remains, stone fragments and obelisks hint at a place where priests once watched the horizon for the first rays of dawn, believing they observed the daily reenactment of creation itself. The god Ra, later merged with Atum as Atum-Ra, became the solar deity whose journey across the sky symbolized the eternal struggle between order and unformed chaos. With each sunrise, creation began anew, and with every sunset, the sun god entered the underworld to battle the serpent of night, ensuring the world's continuation. In Memphis, the cult of Ptah grew alongside the city's transformation into a political capital. As dynasties rose and fell, the Memphite theology embraced the idea that creation was inherently peaceful, a product of intellect rather than cosmic conflict. The idea that the tongue and heart symbols of speech and thought created the world provided a refined, philosophical framework. Scholars studying the Shabaka stone note that it blends theology with a kind of proto-metaphysics, presenting creation as the manifestation of divine consciousness. This notion aligns with the city's identity as a center of craftsmanship. The mind envisions what hands later shape. The role of Ptah as the patron of artisans extended into the grand construction projects that defined Egypt. As workers carved limestone blocks or shaped granite statues, they embodied the Memphite belief that creation was a sacred act mirroring the divine. The very tools they used, chisels, mallets, copper saws, were often ritually purified, reflecting the idea that physical creation echoed the first creation spoken by Ptah. Hermopolis, meanwhile, became renowned as a place of deep contemplation. Its myth, rooted in the primordial Ogdoad, reflected a fascination with the unseen forces underlying existence. The 8 deities' 4 pairs, representing complementary aspects of pre-creation, were viewed not as anthropomorphic figures but as essences, cosmic principles swirling through the waters of none. This abstraction reveals an early Egyptian attempt to understand the universe through dualities, a pattern seen later in philosophical traditions across the world. Archaeological findings in Hermopolis include remnants of a massive temple dedicated to Thoth, the god associated with wisdom, writing, and the preservation of cosmic truth. Though Thoth did not directly participate in the Ogdoad myth, he became its natural guardian. The notion of creation emerging from an egg or lotus aligned with Hermopolitan symbolism, where the birth of the sun was tied to the emergence of knowledge. The priests believed that understanding creation required intellectual inquiry, linking myth with the study of astronomy and sacred texts. These different schools of thought, though geographically distinct, began to influence one another as Egypt unified under powerful early rulers. The pharaohs, in their efforts to solidify authority, adopted and harmonized elements from each tradition. As a result, the myths of Heliopolis, Memphis, and Hermopolis did not remain isolated but became interwoven like the threads of a ceremonial linen shroud. The Egyptians saw no contradiction in this blending. For them, truth was layered and creation could be understood through multiple lenses. As religious centers prospered, the myths evolved further. The rise of Thebes introduced yet another theological vision centered on the god Amun. Originating as a local deity of air and hiddenness, Amun rose to national prominence during the Middle and New Kingdoms. The Theban priests declared Amun the transcendent creator, a hidden force whose presence permeated all things. Their hymn declared, "He whose name is hidden, whose form is unknown," emphasizing that creation itself was the unfolding of a divine mystery too vast for human understanding. As Amun merged with Rhea to form Amun-Re, Thebes developed a synthesis of solar and hidden creation, binding the visible light of the sun with an invisible, all-encompassing essence. This theological merging illustrates how Egyptian religious thought adapted to political power shifts. When Thebes became the heart of the kingdom, its god naturally took on creationary attributes, reshaping earlier myths into a broader, more universal vision. Despite the growing complexity of these myths, one theme remained constant: the triumph of order over chaos. The concept of cosmic balance, justice, and harmony was foundational. Creation was not a one-time event but an ongoing process requiring vigilance. The Egyptians believed the world returned to the brink of chaos every night, symbolized by the sun's descent into darkness. Only through the gods' victorious struggle could the sun rise again. This cycle reflected not only cosmic patterns, but the daily realities of Egyptian life. The flooding of the Nile, though destructive, brought fertile soil. The scorching desert sun, though harsh, enabled growth through its predictable rhythm. Even the landscape itself echoed these beliefs. The fertile black soil of the Nile Valley contrasted with the barren red lands of the desert, symbolizing the duality between life and desolation. The Egyptians identified these opposites not as good and evil, but as necessary components of existence. Their myths mirrored this balance, portraying creation as the emergence of structured beauty from boundless potential. The sacred animals associated with creation myths added further symbolism. The scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the ground, was seen as a symbol of the rising sun pushing its light across the sky. This natural observation inspired the image of Khepri, the morning sun god, associated with rebirth. The lotus flower, rising from muddy waters and opening at dawn, reinforced ideas of purity emerging from darkness. Archaeobotanical studies have confirmed the abundance of lotus flowers in ancient Egyptian wetlands, demonstrating how closely myth was tied to the physical environment. Astronomy also shaped these creation stories. Egyptian priests observed the heavens with remarkable precision. The heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, marked the beginning of the agricultural year and symbolized renewal. The sun's journey was charted through complex calendars, and star constellations such as Orion and the circumpolar stars were woven into religious narratives. This celestial awareness infused the myths with a deeper cosmic order, suggesting that the universe itself was a grand temple crafted by divine hands. As Egypt advanced through the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, temples became living embodiments of creation. Their inner sanctuaries symbolized the Benben Mound, rising from primordial waters. Walls were carved with text describing the first moments of existence. Ceilings were painted with stars. Floors represented the earth. Entering a temple was akin to stepping into the very moment of creation, a journey from chaos to order guided by the presence of the divine. These layers of myth, philosophy, architecture, and cosmic observation formed a rich tapestry that endured for millennia. Even when foreign powers arrived, the core Egyptian vision of creation persisted, echoing through new dynasties and religious reforms. The story of how the world began remained a cornerstone of identity, a reminder of humanity's earliest attempts to understand the mystery of existence. Across the centuries, Egypt's creation myths continued to transform as priests. Scribes and philosophers sought ever deeper meaning in the origins of the world. What began as local traditions rooted in the landscapes of individual cities eventually blossomed into a vast, spiritual framework that shaped how millions understood existence. The Egyptians did not attempt to replace their older myths when new ones rose to prominence. Instead, they layered one vision upon another, weaving a complex and majestic worldview that honored the diversity of creation itself. To them, Truth was not a single point but a constellation of lights flickering above the desert, each star revealing a different aspect of the same eternal mystery. In later ages, temple schools took great care to preserve these layered traditions. Within their stone walls, young scribes learned to read the sacred hieroglyphs, tracing carved symbols that carried the breath of ages. These symbols did not merely record history. They preserved cosmic memory. Through them, the stories of Atum rising from the waters, Ptah crafting the world through thought, and the Ogdoad swirling in darkness before the dawn became eternal. The priests saw themselves as guardians of balance, maintaining the delicate harmony between the seen and unseen worlds. As Egypt entered its most powerful eras, the grandeur of its temples reached new heights. The great complexes of Karnak and Luxor became vast stone mirrors of the cosmic order. Every wall, every column, every axis within these sanctuaries represented a chapter of creation. The central sanctum, dark and enclosed, symbolized the moment before time began. The outer courts, filled with sunlight, represented the emergence of the world from shadow. Archaeologists studying these structures note how carefully they align with celestial movements. At certain times of the year, the rising sun would illuminate sacred chambers in perfect synchrony with festival rituals, reenacting creation through light and architecture. The Egyptians believed that each new morning repeated the first sunrise. When the sun emerged over the eastern horizon, it echoed the original triumph of light over the shapeless void. This belief infused daily life with sacred significance. Farmers tending their fields, craftsmen shaping stone, and priests offering incense all participated in the ongoing renewal of creation. To live in Egypt was to walk in harmony with cosmic rhythms, contributing to the maintenance of Ma'at. Just as the gods had ordered the universe, humanity was entrusted with preserving that order through righteous action, reverence, and gratitude. Even in the realm of the dead, the creation stories held immense power. Funerary texts placed within tombs describe the soul's journey through the underworld, where it passed through caverns lit by the sun god during his nightly voyage. The deceased hoped to join the cycle of rebirth, rising with the sun each dawn. These texts often reference the primordial waters, reminding the soul of its origins and reinforcing that death was only a return to the divine source. In this way, creation myths provided comfort and hope, assuring that life continued beyond the horizon of mortal sight. While the Heliopolitan, Memphite, Hermopolitan, and Theban traditions offered different visions of creation, they shared underlying themes. Each emphasized emergence from darkness, the establishment of order, and the cyclical renewal of life. These themes were not abstract. They were grounded in the natural world. The Nile's floodwaters mirrored the primordial ocean, the rising sun reflected the first light, and the fertile soil symbolized the birth of life from chaos. Egypt's environment, so rich in contrasts between desert and river, night and day, flooding and drought, naturally shaped a worldview where creation was an ongoing miracle rather than a singular event. Centuries turned to millennia, and Egypt faced new influences, new rulers, and new faiths. Yet the creation myths endured in the collective memory of its people. Even when political power shifted, the stories remained anchored in the timeless landscape. Temples dedicated to gods associated with creation continued to receive offerings. Pilgrims traveled long distances to stand before sacred monuments, whispering prayers beneath the towering obelisks whose needle-like forms symbolized the Benben mound touched by the first rays of the sun. Scholars who study these myths today marvel at their sophistication. They contain philosophical reflections on existence, unity, and transformation that resonate far beyond their ancient origins. The vision of a world born from water aligns with modern scientific understanding of life emerging from primordial seas. The emphasis on cycles reflects natural processes observed across disciplines, The idea of creation through thought and word reveals an early appreciation of consciousness and intention, and the symbolic interplay of dualities light and dark, motion and stillness. Male and female mirrors universal patterns found in many cultures across time. Yet the true power of Egypt as creation myths lies not only in their symbolism but in their beauty. They capture the poetic heart of a civilization that gazed upon the stars with wonder, listened to the whisper of river reeds, and believed that behind every natural rhythm lay the touch of the divine. Each myth, though different in form, seeks to answer the same profound question: how did existence begin? The Egyptians approached this question with humility, reverence, and imagination, offering visions that remain compelling even today. As the sun set over the Nile's western bank each evening, priests lit lamps inside the temples. In the flickering glow, they recited hymns describing the first dawn, invoking protection for the coming night. The sound of their chants echoed through stone corridors, carrying ancient wisdom into the darkness. These rituals did not merely recall creation. They reenacted it. Every gesture, every word, every flame honored the eternal dance between order and chaos, ensuring that the world would awaken once more. Through the rise and fall of dynasties, through invasions and the shifting tides of history, the myths survived. When the great libraries fell silent and the temples ceased their daily rituals, the stories remained in inscriptions waiting to be rediscovered. Archaeologists brushing sand from carved symbols found themselves face to face with ideas as old as civilization itself. In these timeless accounts, they uncovered not just religious beliefs, but the heart of a people who saw the world as sacred from its first breath to its last. And so, the epic of creation in ancient Egypt stands today as a testimony to humanity as earliest attempts to understand the mystery of existence. It reflects a world where every sunrise was a blessing, every riverbank a reminder of divine generosity, and every star a messenger of eternity. The myths reveal a civilization that believed life emerged from tranquility, rose into order, and continued through endless cycles of renewal. In their stories, the universe is not cold or mechanical, but alive, vibrant, and filled with meaning. Now, as the curtain falls on this journey through ancient beliefs, the echoes of those first cosmic moments linger like the final strains of music in a temple hall. The waters of Nun remain still beneath the horizon. The Benben Mound glows with the promise of dawn. The voice of Ptah whispers creation into the air, and the lotus of Hermopolis slowly opens its petals, releasing the first light of morning. Across the ages, these visions endure, inviting all who listen to witness the birth of the world through the eyes of one of history's greatest civilizations. As the fires of the ancient storytellers fade and the night settles gently over the desert, the tale of creation rests once more in silence. And in that silence, the universe breathes, carrying forward the eternal truth that from darkness comes light, from stillness comes life, and from mystery comes meaning. If these ancient voices touched your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thank you for watching.